Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Rausan Pereira. India is the first country in the world to make corporate social responsibility mandatory, following an amendment to the Company Act of 2013 in April 2014. Businesses can invest their profits in areas such as education, poverty, gender equality and hunger. Earlier today, Ravi Shankar Prasad, Minister of Electronics and IT and Law and Justice, met IT industry leaders to discuss issues related to corporate social volunteering. Over 50 representatives of the IT industry took part in the event. The consultation with the industry leaders centered around extensive involvement of the IT industry for social good and development. The IT leaders agreed to join and proactively partake in the movement titled Me to We and Self to Society. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will take stock of corporate social responsibility. Joining me on the program today are Anil Sood, founder, Chetna NGO, Ajay, former Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, SK Sarkar, Managing Committee member, ASSOCHAM, and Gyaneshwar Kumar Singh, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Corporate Affairs. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Mr. Dua, I'd like to begin the program with you. First and foremost, what is corporate social responsibility and how responsible are our corporates as far as the society is concerned?
I think, as the very title implies, you're doing something not merely for yourself, but for the society. That's why the word social. And corporate responsibility is the formal sector of the economy, what it is doing for the society. The term has evolved over time. It's as old as probably the corporate sector
itself,
would
yeah.
think. But we have in 2014, as you mentioned, and under the new company law, given it a more precise definition, as well as imposed an obligation upon the corporate sector, provided it's meeting one of the three criteria. It's in terms of net worth of the company, annual turnover, or a certain level of profits. Then 2% of the average profit of last 3 years is required to be spent by the corporate sector on, broadly speaking, the 4 factors which you mentioned, including gender issues. If the companies do not comply with it, then they have to provide, with the approval of the board of directors, in their annual report, the reasons for not being able to fulfill it.
Right.
This was the starting point. I don't think Mr. Singh will be in a better position to give you up-to-date picture whether any company has been penalized for not having fulfilled these 2% obligation and simultaneously not being able to give a good enough explanation which must appear in its annual report.
Mr. Singh, are explanations given more often than not, or do the corporates meet this criteria?
See, our experience has been mixed. Good corporates, they are taking pride because corporate social responsibility is not a burden. It's an opportunity for a company. It's a part of a brand value. And as we have seen, the whole philosophy of business has changed. Business is not just for profit, it is for people and environment also. So now we call it 3P, profit, planet and people. But there are companies which are still small companies, many companies, they are not able to find good projects, so they explain also. So it's a mixed picture. I can tell you last 3 years, around 38,000 crores companies they have reported they have spent. So it's a good beginning.
Are these small companies given a long rope?
See, it's all companies have been, unless you are away from this threshold, what Mr. Dua has said, that net worth, turnover and profit, if you come under that, you have to fulfill. There is no exception.
Okay, let me go across to Anil Sood now. As far as corporate social responsibility is concerned, Anil Sood, do these corporates have ulterior motives as well?
See, the concept was very noble. The idea was very noble. Unfortunately, today in the market, there are 110 people, they will come to you, they'll say, okay, I have CSR funds, I'll give you check, 50% you pay me cash. Now, this kind of scenario, and I think a few months ago, there were few raids where people were caught also. So I wonder at times that, okay, how this money is coming, why this money is coming, and again, you know, the people, they have guts to identify themselves with the big corporates, including PSUs. So my worry is that, okay, fair enough, money is to be spent on social responsibility. If this kind of takers are there, offer is there, some people do, accept such offers, then how that 50% which is taken back in cash, how utilization certificate is given? So this has become a serious issue. In case of some of the banks, they have their chairpersons, they had appointed their own people, they had funded them. Now, since those people have got transferred, so fund source has dried up. Similarly, in sugar cane area, if you go, you will find sugar cane industry is spending money on development of the area, which mandatorily, otherwise in UP, it is to be spent by the sugar companies. Now, sugar companies on one hand, they are showing a CSR. At the same time, they are showing compliance with the UP Sugar Cane Act. So, strangely, we have to think through very seriously that how the funds are being siphoned out, how the disclosures are being made, and why till today major culprits have not been caught.
All right. Yeah, do you want to respond to that very quickly, GK Singh?
What
See,
you have said,
funds are being siphoned off.
see, the whole philosophy of New Companies Act is more of a disclosure, because we can't see the corporate governance in isolation, whatever we are right now talking about ease of doing business. So this job has been given to the companies themselves, and as for 135 of the Act, each company should have a corporate social responsibility board. They are supposed to formulate policy, board is supposed to monitor, then auditor is supposed to audit, and it is a part of board report. But what we have done recently, because when it started, we thought that this is the time to create enabling environment, more of a sensitization. 2014-15, we have a high level committee. They said, don't go for enforcement, let them first explore. But when we realized that many companies, even if they have the money, they are not spending, we have filed prosecution for more than 254 companies. And out of that, 30 companies has come for compounding. For this year, means for 15-16, we are sending call letters for 272 companies. So we are aware of the fact good companies are doing, but there is a need to caution some of the companies who are not very serious.
And you are aware of what these companies or who these companies are?
See, that is not our mandate, because the mandate is of the board, because either government is part of it or government is away.
Sure. Yes, Mr. Dua. You are a part of a couple of these boards as well. You're on the board. So how do you look at these aspects?
I would think that having made it mandatory and, so to say, sold the concept to the private sector, nobody is now any longer questioning the need for it. In the beginning, there was saying, can India afford to be the first country to mandatorily prescribe CSR and up to 2% of the profit, etc.? I think that's died down. No longer in the boards. That's the discussion. But certainly, as Mr. Sood pointed out and as Mr. Singh explained, I think there is a need to tighten the regulations under it, as if necessary, by even looking at Section 135 itself. Today, the requirement is 3 members of the board, minimum 3 members in the CSR committee. I would like to see, as it has been done for the audit committee, that the chairman of this committee should invariably be an independent director, not a promoter director or the chairman of the company or so. That requirement is not there today. So that it will show that there is, at a bit of a distance, it's being done.
Right.
Second, I would like to see that a very common method of fulfilling the requirement, apart from what Mr. Sood mentioned, is that many companies have got their own NGOs for execution. That everybody has a trust, a resolution passed in the CSR committee, approved in the board. Then for implementing the agency, give it to a trust of which there is a relationship between the promoters or the company owners and the trust. I would like to see that either forbidden, and certainly forbidden to the extent it can any related, the definition of related party transaction is given, that how many, up to what stage is a related party transaction, or who are related parties, and transaction with them requires prior approval, etc. So as the related party definition has been given, if anybody is involved with any of the trusts, then that trust should be forbidden from being the executing agency for the CSR funds of that or CSR commitment of that company.
Right. I'm just going to come to you. Before that, Mr. Sarkar has been patiently listening to all the other panelists, so I'm going to quickly go to him for a reaction. Are corporates really indulging in this and, contributing or giving back to the society because it is mandatory under the Act, or, are they doing it out of their own will?
Let me play the devil's advocate over here. The guru of modern economics, Milton Friedman, said that the business of business is to make profits. Anything else it does is corporate social irresponsibility. So you see, what is the work of business? The business is to create wealth. They are not to get into social issues, which has been, I would say, that this mandatory thing happening is a little forced down their throats. They have been forced to do this. Now, when you do that kind of a situation, and when you lay down certain criteria, like you have the 500 crore net worth, you have the 1,000 crore turnover, then you have the 5 crore net worth, net profit. Now, again, the definition of net profit also differs in the sense that the law says that it has to be as per Section 198 of the Act. Broadly speaking, the net profit means that it has to be profit before tax. But again, there are ifs and buts over here. Ifs and buts in the sense that if there is a tax on abnormal profits, that is deductible. If there is any special charge on the business profits of the company, that is again deductible. So you have to arrive at the figure. Now you look at these three figures of 500, 1005. They are way out. They are not in sync at all. 5 crores versus 500 versus 1,000 crores. The profit, I think, the figures that we are talking about, 5 crores is too low. You say that small companies, I don't think small companies today have that wherewithal to get involved in such kind of activities. Then again, you are saying that whatever profits that you make, whatever spending that you do on CSR is not tax deductible. It is below the line. So that 2% that I spend of the average net profits of the last 3 years is not an expense for me. Now, I go back to my earlier question that this is, I'm not, as a businessman, I should not be involved in this. My objective here is...
It should be the prerogative of the government, it should not be the prerogative of businesses, is what you're suggesting.
I think the government has pushed it to the business community.
Okay, government has pushed it down the throat of the business community is what one of the panelists has said, but he has also started off by saying he's going to play devil's advocate. So, GK Singh, your point, please.
There are two quick comments. One is that as for the Act 135(1), when we form the Corporate Social Responsibility Committee, minimum 3 members, one should be independent directors. As of now, there is a provision of independent director. There are issues for implementation. There are lots of feedback we are receiving. So what we can say that government is conscious, but our approach is we don't directly monitor, we don't interfere. That's a broader philosophy of corporate governance as per Companies Act 2013. But what we have done, we have set up recently on 28th of September, a high-level committee headed by Secretary, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, to look into all the suggestions what we have received from civil society, activists, industries also, to look at the way it is being implemented, to see the implementation mechanism, impact, even the coverage. So committee has started working. It has to give its report within the 3 months. And slightly I will disagree with my colleague that business is only for profit. That was a definition when I was young. Business is for profit. Now the business is not sustainable if you don't take care of the community. And Companies Act talks about Just I will.
Community is what makes business, is what you're suggesting. Okay.
Because
Right.
without that,
Just a
Let
point.
him complete. Let him complete. I'll
No,
come to
I'm
you.
just adding a point
Yeah.
to what he said. I'm not into. He said that there will be 3 members forming the corporate. But Singh Saab, there's also a provision that in case the company does not have any provision for independent director, I'm just adding. I'm just adding.
So
that two
what we
direct-
are saying,
then 2 directors can form.
What we
form
are
the company.
saying that time has changed. If we calculate community pushback cost on the business, it's a humongous. And we have interaction with the corporates, they take it as a brand value these days. They don't take it as a cost. So corporates, they are willing to come also. So it's a mixed story. And we have defined 166 of Companies Act. I think this we may be the first in the world, not for making CSR mandatory as per section 135. In 166 too, we talk about the role of the directors is not only to look after the shareholder, but to community, environment, everything. So the journey, Indian Companies Act, Indian philosophy of business is movement from shareholder to stakeholder, and that is the sustainable way of responsible business.
All right.
I would disagree with that, because business means creating jobs, creating wealth for the nation. So it has its role to play as far as in the nation building. But social responsibility has to be the job of our political rulers.
All right. Anil Sood. Yeah.
See, when Mr. Singh says that corporate CSR has to take care of environment, society, and they have received suggestions from civil society activists. See, the major contribution, major negligence is from government companies itself, so far as environmental issues are concerned. Because law is taken for granted, civil society is taken for granted, activists are taken for granted. See the latest case of NBCC. If it was corporate, socially responsible organization, then the kind of decisions which have been taken in recent past wouldn't have been taken at all. Now take example of NHAI. The kind of decisions they have taken, very easy route, dig, cut and fill. Why can't they, if they are looking at environment, why can't they go underground tunneling just like Metro has done it? So first of all, the environmental concern, if
Cascades of land, is it really possible to do something like that, is something that we need to take into consideration as well. And that could be a problem, because see, in cities, you have, limited space to work with, so tunnels can be built. But when you're talking about highways and other aspects of it, of course, it becomes a little more complicated, don't you think?
I am not talking of complete highway. From particular highway, if you have to create a bypass, small bypass of 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer, you need not to dig. You can go underground tunneling. Now at Dhola Kuan, we chopped off trees. We could have gone underground for 2 kilometers and created.
I'm coming to you, Mr. Dua.
We could have created an environmentally friendly road under the ground, saving the environment. So that is where I feel that the role of the government PSUs and government-owned companies should be much more serious than private sector.
Okay. All right. Yes, Mr.
I
Dua.
think just to specifically answer Mr. Sood's question, while the suggestion is very good, you do have certain examples of it. For instance, not too far away from Dhola Kuan is Gurgaon.
Yeah.
In Gurgaon, exactly what you are talking about, bypasses under the ground have been built, almost a dozen of them, and that has certainly facilitated the flow of traffic. I don't deny that. But in a poor economy, if we can afford it everywhere, I've been involved with one company which was involved with tunneling as National Hydropower Corporation's chairman cum managing director for some time. We have seen the cost of tunnel boring can be huge. The damage it can cause if there is an existing settlement already by tunneling itself. Some of those houses could collapse. They could be, for instance, Metro. Metro from Lajpat Nagar station to the South Extension. Now it goes under a colony I live in called Defence Colony. Houses have cracked there because of tunneling, and Delhi Metro has had to come and repair those. So somewhere it's possible in a virgin area, etc. Many places not. But let's keep in mind the cost of it.
Yes.
That was just a direct
No, no,
answer
absolutely
to
fine.
But having said that, I would think that to say that there is no responsibility of the corporate sector and it should only be doing business is a 200-year-old concept. Adam Smith may have said that. But the fact of the matter is...
Times have changed is what you're suggesting.
We have moved over
Okay.
time tremendously, and today, in the corporate sector, the ones who are doing well, they are saying 95% of my wealth I'm going to pledge to charity. So somebody says, no, 99%. There is a competition amongst them for that. The fact of the matter is, please do that work rather than after you. While you are there, look after the society from which you are making money. And I do think that particularly looking after the community in which your own facilities have been set up. Just look at, you may have provided jobs, but you also cause a fair amount of disruption of various kinds that must be compensated, and through CSR is one method of doing it.
All my panelists want to speak right now, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop speaking and going to give you a chance one at a time to complete your points, starting first with GK Singh.
Two quick feedback. One is that the data speaks for itself. The public sector companies, they are subject to CSR audit. So we can take pride, they are spending their money. Individual cases, we will not like to discuss. And Mr. Dua has already discussed resource constraint and particular situation where some strategy will be workable, some strategy will not be workable. Second question is, right now, the debate, what Mr. Dua has said, I want to take it one step further. It is not just CSR. Now, we were earlier talking about you earn profit, spend 2% of your profit before tax on the community. Now, the debate has gone further. International level, we had United Nations guiding principle of business and human rights, where again their debate is right now, they will have the General Assembly in somewhere last week of November, where they are discussing how to inculcate or integrate core values of human rights in business. So we have passed that distance where we can't talk about only profit. It's a bigger cost if corporates are not responsible for society. And John Reggie is the person who has been engaged by UN Secretary General in 2008 to develop some kind of a study framework, how business can be responsible and business can take into account human rights. So they have come with a framework, protect, respect and remedy.
Right.
And protect, respect and remedy, when he talks about, he says business should be wise. What I mentioned earlier, community pushback cost is enormous. If you take care of your community, if you take care of society in general, your business will be much more profitable and sustainable.
SK Sarkar.
Sir, when I make profits, I give it back to the society in the form of taxes. Now, that is when the political leaders and the bureaucrats need to take over, and they need to use that for the social functions for which they are responsible. That's number one. Number two is that, you see, please do not put anything on me in a mandatory, a compulsory kind of a situation. It's voluntary. Now, when we talk about stakeholders of a company, the stakeholders of a company are not just the shareholders. It's the creditors, it's the debtors. How do I keep my customers base? If I don't keep my customers happy, I will not be able to do business. Today, it is a very, very competitive world. And in such a situation, I need to look after all my stakeholders. So if I have to compulsorily do that, if I have to remain in business, or I get knocked off. Another point which I wanted to make, and this is entirely maybe for the viewers and maybe for the panelists also, if you look at Schedule 7, now the government says that we want the corporates to get involved in social work. Very, very great idea. But if you go through Schedule 7, it also says that you can get away by making a contribution to the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund, which means you're actually not doing any social work at all. You're just passing on the funds. So as I said it before also, if I make profits and I pay taxes, I should be allowed to sit back and continue my business. So
right.
so where is I don't think the government is meeting its objective by doing what they're doing today.
All right, closing comments now from all my guests, starting with you first, Anil Sood. What more needs to be done, do you think? I mean, as far as corporates are concerned and as far as giving to the society is concerned?
See, I agree with Mr. Sarkar that it should be more voluntary. The moment you force down something through in the throat, it is bound to boomerang, number one. Number two, when we look at the government role, I tend to agree with him on this aspect also, taxes are being paid. Now, once taxes are being paid, the government's 4 core responsibilities are there: education, health, environment. And 4th is defense, which every common person deals with. Now, first 3 limbs are missing altogether. Today, we are in worst environment. We don't have health. We don't have security. We don't have education. Where are we heading to as nation? Now, if we go by that 2% of CSR will be spent on this, I think this is a big misnomer.
Okay. Mr. Dua, I'll tell you what I have a problem with. Companies, of course, in the name of CSR, starting a trust or an NGO, something that you spoke about, using those profits again, or, money out of that, back into the company and then using it for something else at the end of the day.
I don't think it's money comes back. What we were referring to was a trust is of people close to you. In a way, you are giving away money to them, but all that the CSR committees or the board say, that the accounts of that trust are being audited and just give us an audit report.
Right.
That is probably not the best way to go forward, because the reason why it gets given to those is that otherwise we have to appoint an implementing agency. We don't have the core staff to do it, etc. We can only monitor it. We cannot implement it. It is moving away from their real strength. So that's how these companies come in, the trust coming. What I was referring to was, while appreciating the concern which Mr. Sarkar has, I would say that here, if everything the government does, we know the managerial efficiency in government. We know the constraints upon government to do everything. We are talking about public-private partnership on almost social welfare also. These issues, this is the best way.
Right.
Saying, look, you have your own style, you are probably more efficient than the government is. Here is your money, you have the freedom, but please do it. Broadly speaking, these are the 4 areas: health, poverty, alleviation, grievance, etc. So this is, I think, my suggestions were not to say that it should not be done through the companies themselves, but make sure that there is no siphoning off or leakages there.
Points taken.
And I will just end up by saying that, look, the whole world is now moving towards impact assessment.
Right.
Banks wanting to lend money for impact assessment, what makes impact. So that is also social.
Sure.
So that is where we need to be moving.
I'm sorry to cut you short. Very limited time. 1 minute. So very quickly, GK Singh, closing comment from you.
From the ministry perspective, we are aware of the challenges for implementation of CSR. What we are doing right now, we have formed a high-level committee. We'll review everything: implementation mechanism, social audit, how it can be improved. We have also constituted from this year National CSR Award to promote good practices, so that there are role models within the corporates they can see. We have also started to use the IT to spread the good message of the CSR. In the ministry, there is a CSR portal where...
All right. Limited time. I'm sorry to cut you short. SK Sarkar, if not through CSR, then how does a corporate give back to the society?
No, but you are forcing me to become a bad boy in the sense that you are not giving me the tax benefits which you should be giving me. If you at least give me that benefit, at least then I can be a more socially responsibility towards the social causes.
Right.
So that is the point which I think which is very important. And in any case, as I said before, the stakeholders, I have to take care of them. I am making profits, I am giving it back to the society.
Sure.
Make it 3% and give them tax benefit. It amounts to 2 crores.
Okay. Yeah.
No, but why? Why can't it be 1%?
Gentlemen, all right. Mr. Sood, go ahead.
Your apprehension of this trust and all is very well founded. This is the business model which is being propagated and advertised today, that okay, one is the NGO which gets the funds, then the NGO also establishes a trust. Now 20% NGO retains, 80% goes to the trust. Then out of that 80%, 60% that company spends, which is implementing agency. So 40% is retained by the trust and NGO.
Right. So this aspect also needs to be addressed and looked at closely is what you're suggesting. All right. On that note, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. See you again next time.